Ever stop to wonder if our modern world is truly an upgrade from the past? Sure, medieval peasants didn't have smartphones or central heating, but they enjoyed some surprising perks that many Americans today might envy. Their way of life holds hidden advantages that challenge everything we assume about progress. Forget what your history teacher said about peasants toiling from dawn to dusk. The real story might raise your eyebrows. Records show they had more days off than we do now, roughly 150 a year. That's nearly half the calendar. Sundays were always free, and religious festivals filled the rest. New saints may have gained popularity simply for giving people a day off. With daylight limited and the ground too hard to till, people stayed indoors and rested. Today, Americans slog through icy commutes and sweltering summers alike, glued to glowing screens no matter the season. The medieval workday wasn't your rigid 9 to 5 either. It shifted with daylight and demand. Sure, harvest time meant long days, but most of the year had a gentler rhythm. Afternoon naps, totally normal in some places. Try asking for a siesta at your office and see how that plays out. They also value downtime in ways we've largely forgotten. Leisure wasn't laziness. It was a vital part of spiritual and social well-being. Contrast that with today's grind culture, where exhaustion is worn like a badge of honor. The 40-hour workweek barely scratches the surface once you factor in commutes and after-hours emails. Medieval peasants didn't get pings from their lord at midnight. When their workday ended, it truly ended. A recent study found that the average American office worker clocks in 47 hours a week, with nearly a third working over 50. Around 40% still check emails after hours. Contrast that with a medieval life, where seasonal celebrations like spring plantings, midsummer feasts, and harvest festivals weren't just days off. They were sacred rituals tied to nature's rhythm. So, the next time you're replying to work emails on a Sunday, remember, those so-called primitive peasants understood something we've forgotten. Life isn't supposed to be all work. Their simplicity extended beyond work hours. It showed up in their total lack of paperwork. Living in the Middle Ages meant freedom from the endless bureaucratic trail that haunts modern life. No licenses to renew, no taxes to file, no endless password resets. Society was straightforward. Peasants farmed, lords collected, and everyone knew their place. No forms, no disclaimers, no terms and conditions. If someone in medieval times needed to prove who they were, they didn't wait in line at a government office. A neighbor would vouch for them. Yep, that's Tom. Knew him since he was knee-high to a goat. Compare that to today, 13 hours per person each year just to file taxes. That's over 6 billion hours nationwide. Back then, taxes meant giving the local lord some eggs, not hiring an accountant. Healthcare was no paradise, but at least it skipped the insurance drama. If you were sick, the village healer did what they could. No forms, no phone trees, no billing departments, no credit scores either. No 15-page terms just to open a bank account. Loans were personal and built on trust, not algorithms. Renting today means background checks, proof of income, deposits, contracts thicker than a medieval Bible. Most peasants lived on the same land for life. Housing rights were unwritten but respected. Rules were enforced through face-to-face conversations, not legal jargon. Village elders mediated disputes with plain talk, not lawsuits. Today, we rely on lawyers just to understand what we're signing. Medieval folks handled problems the old-fashioned way. No holding music, no bots, no case numbers. Even marriage was easier. A church service or public vow was enough. No courthouse visits, no multi-step processes. Modern stress isn't just about work, it's the constant admin. Peasants might have worked hard, but they didn't end the day sorting through a stack of urgent envelopes. We've traded convenience for complexity. While we gained gadgets, we also built a maze of rules. Maybe there's something wise about the medieval way. Fewer papers, fewer passwords, and more time for real life. And let's not forget the food. A peasant's diet was what we now market as premium, local, organic, and seasonal. Not by choice, but by default. No preservatives, no plastic packaging. They weren't health gurus, they just ate what grew nearby. And somehow, that might have been the healthiest choice of all. What did medieval people actually eat? Their meals revolved around whole grains like barley, rye, and oats. Fresh vegetables came straight from garden plots and changed with the seasons. Staples included cabbage, onions, leeks, turnips, and garlic. Fruits were plucked ripe from trees or foraged from nearby bushes. Even the herbs they used were freshly picked, not dried, packaged, or months old in glass jars. Did peasants eat meat? Yes, but not like we do today. It was reserved for special occasions or served in small portions with stews and soups. Fish was more common, especially near coasts and rivers. Most of their protein came from eggs, cheese, and milk, sourced from animals fed natural diets, not processed feed. Craving something sweet? They didn't have candy aisles or neon-colored snacks. Their desserts were simple: honey, fresh fruit, or an occasional pastry during a festival. No high-fructose corn syrup, no chemical additives, no lab-created flavors. Just nature's sugar in moderation. Today's food is engineered to hook us with just the right mix of salt, sugar, and fat to trigger the bliss point. Medieval food wasn't addictive. It was seasonal, hearty, and rooted in the rhythms of the land. You ate until you were full, not manipulated into a second helping. One University of Cambridge study looked at medieval skeletons and found surprisingly healthy teeth. Despite no toothpaste, cavities were rarer. Why? Their low-sugar diet offered natural protection. No soda, no processed sweets, no gummy vitamins masquerading as health food. Without modern processed carbs and sugary overloads, diabetes was practically unheard of. Their insulin systems weren't constantly under siege. The average medieval peasant wasn't counting carbs or reading nutrition labels. They just weren't eating refined sugar to begin with. Obesity was rare. Their diet, simple, whole, and unprocessed, combined with constant physical activity, kept weight in check. Heart disease, now a leading cause of death, was much less common. And no trans fats, no deep-fried fast food, no ultra-processed oils. Their arteries had a lot less to deal with. Preserving food wasn't done with chemicals. It was an art. Smoking, fermenting, drying, and salting not only kept food fresh, but boosted nutrition. Sauerkraut, for instance, was full of gut-friendly probiotics, long before anyone used the word microbiome. They didn't need health trends, they had traditions. Modern food labels can feel like chemistry exams. What's sodium benzoate? Why is disodium phosphate in my chicken? In medieval times, food labels, if they existed, would be refreshingly clear. Bread, flour, water, salt, yeast, and it was baked just yesterday by the guy down the street. Sure, medieval people endured food shortages, especially in harsh winters. Their diets weren't perfect, but in many ways, the simplicity of their meals shielded them from the chronic illnesses we now face. While their pantries weren't as stocked as our modern supermarkets, their food was real, natural, whole, and untouched by machines. That kind of diet did their bodies a lot of good. And when it came to overall health, their close-knit communities offered another major advantage. Today, people turn to therapists or scroll endlessly through social media trying to feel connected. Medieval peasants didn't have to look far. Their entire lives were steeped in human contact and shared experience. Their villages were living, breathing social networks. In a group of 50 to 200 people, no one was anonymous. People knew each other's stories, quirks, and family trees. Women talked while washing clothes at the stream. Men traded advice while working the land. Kids played freely, learning from older peers. Everyday tasks built trust and connection. Today, companies spend a fortune on team-building exercises to recreate what came naturally from pushing a stuck cart together in the mud. Village festivals weren't optional calendar events. They were woven into the rhythm of life, times to gather, celebrate, and reinforce unity. Singing, dancing, and shared meals kept bonds strong. Today, loneliness is a growing health concern. A recent study showed 61% of young American adults report serious loneliness. But in medieval life, vanishing without notice wasn't possible. If you didn't show up, your neighbors came knocking. Homes in the Middle Ages weren't designed for isolation. They encouraged connection. Medieval houses were small, shared spaces where multiple generations lived together. Doors were rarely locked, and villages were arranged around communal areas where people naturally crossed paths throughout the day. When hardship struck, neighbors didn't look the other way. Without outside aid, survival depended on each other. And that necessity forged deep, lasting bonds. Today, we send texts like, "Let's catch up soon," and never follow through. Back then, you couldn't ghost your neighbors unless you literally became a ghost. Children weren't chauffeured between scheduled events. They grew up alongside adults, observing, helping, and learning through daily life. They understood where they fit in and what their future roles would be. Modern life often demands we choose between career and connection. Medieval peasants didn't face that split. Work and relationships were one and the same. Helping your neighbor wasn't a weekend favor. It was survival. That shared responsibility created a social safety net many today are still searching for. And with that strong support came another hidden benefit: less financial anxiety. Today, millions lie awake stressing over bills. A 2023 survey found that 64% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Medieval peasants had plenty of struggles, but they didn't worry about overdraft fees or rising rent. Housing back then followed the tenure system. Peasants worked the land and in return lived on it. No rent checks, no 30-year mortgages. Families usually stayed in the same home for generations. No sudden rent spikes from a landlord. Any unfair increase risked real rebellion. There were no credit cards either. While borrowing existed, few carried debt, especially not at 20% interest. The average American now owes $5,500 in credit card debt, something that would have seemed absurd to a medieval farmer. Debt was personal, and reputation was your credit score. Education also worked differently. Instead of sinking into student debt, young people learned trades through apprenticeships, earning while learning. And their homes? Far from cluttered. A solid wooden table might last through generations, not get replaced every time a newer model came out. The medieval version of checking your credit score? Seeing if the local baker still waved at you in the morning. If he did, you were in good standing. Medieval peasants walked nearly everywhere. No car loans, no insurance bills, no surprise repairs, no fuel costs. Compare that to today, where the average American shells out over $9,000 a year just to keep a car on the road. Taxes back then didn't come as monthly bills. They were paid in goods or labor, maybe a few sacks of grain, or a couple of days helping on the Lord's land. Taxes were tied directly to what you produced. This made finances simple. No bill calendars, no account juggling, no deciphering fine print on insurance policies. That mental clarity freed up time and energy for more important parts of life. Sleep isn't something we typically think medieval peasants had over us. Their beds were straw, not memory foam. Their pillows weren't gel-cooled. Their blankets weren't gravity-weighted. And yet, when it comes to healthy, natural sleep, they were way ahead of us. The secret? They followed the sun. No electricity meant waking with sunrise and winding down at sunset. This matched the body's natural rhythm. Darkness triggers melatonin, the sleep hormone, something modern humans sabotage with bright lights and endless screens. Today, we buy $60 sleep masks to block out what medieval people called night. One University of Colorado study showed that people camping without devices quickly reset to natural sleep cycles. Medieval folks lived that way permanently. While we're scrolling Instagram at 2 a.m., they were 6 hours deep into dreams, probably about turnips, but still restful. And speaking of dreams, medieval sleep had another twist. It was often biphasic. People commonly slept in 2 chunks, 4 hours, then woke for an hour or 2, then slept another 4. That midnight break wasn't wasted. They prayed, chatted, worked on crafts, or even visited neighbors. While we toss and turn alone in the dark, medieval folks were sipping broth, talking barley, and embracing the night, not fighting it. Modern sleep scientists now believe that the medieval approach to rest, sleeping in 2 phases, might actually be more natural than our current push for 8 uninterrupted hours. In studies where people are removed from artificial light, many instinctively return to this segmented sleep pattern. The average medieval peasant likely got around 8 to 9 hours of total sleep, far more than today's average of just 6.8 hours. Over a third of American adults don't even get the recommended minimum of 7 hours. We now have 23 different apps telling us how poorly we sleep. Medieval peasants had 0 apps and 0 sleep issues. Coincidence? You decide. Other parts of medieval life helped too. Physical labor made them truly tired by nightfall. No afternoon espressos, no sugary midnight snacks, no doom scrolling the news before bed. While we spend hundreds on white noise machines and sleep subscriptions, medieval villagers fell asleep to the sound of the night guard shouting "All's well" every hour. Their version of environmental monitoring, medieval style. Their homes, though simple, had sleep-friendly features. Without central heating, bedrooms cooled naturally at night, something sleep experts now say helps promote deeper rest. Today's routine includes humidifiers, melatonin, blackout curtains, and sleep-tracking devices. Their routine? Blow out the candle. Done. There was no light pollution either. When it got dark, it got truly dark. Modern cities rarely let our brains experience that kind of total blackness. Streetlights, glowing billboards, and LED alarm clocks constantly tell your brain to stay alert. Medieval peasants might have dealt with the occasional rat or uncomfortable mattress, but they didn't face the systematic, round-the-clock disruptions we've built into modern life. That deep, unbroken rest supported both physical and mental health, something we now chase with therapy and supplements. And speaking of well-being, medieval people had one more big advantage: no corporate surveillance. Sure, they had lords and feudal dues, but they didn't have megacorporations tracking every bite they took. In modern America, just 10 companies control most of the food we eat. Medieval peasants knew where their food came from, literally. The fields were right there. The bread was baked by the neighbor, not a faceless brand with quarterly earnings goals. Modern supermarkets are laid out to manipulate your every purchase. Medieval markets had no psychology departments. Their marketing tactic? We have turnips. That's it. If you wanted turnips, you bought them. Work was different too. A medieval blacksmith or cobbler learned through apprenticeship and eventually became a master. They chose their hours, maintained quality, and worked face-to-face with customers. Today, 78% of Americans work for someone else, often within corporations where decisions are made in boardrooms by people you'll never meet. Medieval workers often spent their whole lives mastering a single craft. The average modern employee? They'll change jobs about 12 times during their career. Corporate retreats today try to force team bonding with trust falls and icebreakers. Medieval guilds? They shared real skills and sometimes settled rivalries with sticks. Privacy wasn't a concern back then either. Medieval peasants never worried about their personal data being harvested. Today, the average American appears in over 1,000 digital databases. Corporations track your purchases, location, reading habits, and conversations. More than 60% of U.S. businesses are now owned by large corporations. In contrast, medieval economies were truly local. Wealth was spread among many small producers, not funneled to the top. There were no glowing logos on every surface either. The average modern American sees between 4,000 and 10,000 ads per day. That's a constant stream of mental noise medieval people never had to filter out. Even our language has been commercialized. We verb brand names and recognize thousands of logos. Medieval language was rich in local idioms, practical wisdom, and unbranded expressions. Sure, medieval societies had inequality, but nothing like the modern wealth gap. The 3 richest Americans today own more than the bottom 50% of the country combined. Medieval inequality lacked billion-dollar corporations engineered to extract attention and income. Yes, corporations have brought conveniences, but the medieval freedom from being tracked, analyzed, and monetized gave people a different kind of liberty. Their lives weren't productized, their identities weren't reduced to user profiles. And when they wanted entertainment, they didn't need Netflix, TikTok, or PlayStations, they made their own fun. Imagine a world without binge watching and not being bored. Their amusements built skills and community, not screen fatigue. Storytelling was central. Before books were widespread, people passed down tales orally. Traveling storytellers brought news, myths, and adventures to entire villages. Everyone gathered to listen, imagine, and connect. Today's kids say, "I'm bored," while scrolling YouTube. Medieval kids said, "I'm bored," and got handed a stick to chase chickens. That's character development. Music was everywhere. Most people played simple instruments, drums, flutes, strings, and sang during work or celebrations. Today, only 15% of Americans can play an instrument. Back then, basic musical ability was common. Physical games kept bodies strong and spirits high. Kids played tag and ball games. Adults joined in with archery, wrestling, and strength contests. These weren't just for fun, they built skills and social bonds. Festivals like May Day or Harvest Feasts brought whole villages together with performances, games, and food. Now we spend 45 minutes deciding what to stream, then sit silently staring at separate screens. Medieval fun? The jugglers in town. Everyone gather. No subscriptions, no buffering. Just a guy doing a handstand while his monkey passed a hat. Instant crowd pleaser. Crafts too were part work, part play. Winter nights were filled with wood carving, embroidery, board games like chess and backgammon or simple dice games. Wandering performers, acrobats, musicians, jugglers brought excitement to village life. Their shows were events that pulled people together. This self-made joy mirrored everything else in medieval life. It was hands-on, face-to-face, and refreshingly direct. In a world without endless noise and digital clutter, their way of living had a clarity and connection we can still learn from today.